With a purposeful grimace and a terrible sound, he pulls the spitting high-tension wires down. The Blue Oyster Cult might have said, "Go-Go, Korea." On this episode of Deja Vu, the story of a monster with soul. The early 1960s were part of the golden age of South Korean cinema. But by mid-decade, censorship was tightening as the country struggled under a military dictatorship. So in 1966, director Ki-Duk Kim, respected for his occasionally subversive social issues films, was suddenly looking for a new genre to tackle, one that was more politically palatable. He found inspiration in the international success and appeal of Japan's recent giant monster, or kaiju, cycle, which had begun with Toho Studios' Godzilla in 1954, and so he set out to create a city-toppling behemoth for his own country. He chose for his monster the name Yongary, a portmanteau of Yong for dragon, and Pulgasari, a legendary beast who would one day get his own film. For the rest, he decided to borrow liberally from the big G. Just not Godzilla. In fact, by the mid-60s, Toho's once unstoppable Godzilla was hemorrhaging ticket sales. Thanks to competition from television and other studios, plus the loss of overseas partners, Godzilla films could no longer justify their large budgets in the face of ever-diminishing returns. It seemed like the end for the kaiju movie. But in 1965, Daiei Studios surprised everyone with Gamera, a monster flick costing pennies on the dollar compared to Godzilla and aimed squarely at kids. Starring a giant turtle who's fond of children, the splashy, colorful Gamera films valued spectacle over polish. And the first film was so popular, it spawned a sequel a year for 6 straight years. The series' success and minimal budgets made it the ideal template for Yongary, from its visuals to its story. Thus, Yongary, like Gamera, is awakened by a nuclear bomb from a foreign power, breathes flames, eats fire from oil refineries, and forges a connection with the child hero, after a fashion. The film's original language ending even implies that Yongary is not killed, as it seems, but is captured alive and shipped off in a rocket to another planet, just as Gamera was. Now, using the bones of Gamera's story was one thing, but emulating its special effects was another. Suitmation and miniature-heavy films had never been attempted in South Korea. They didn't have the expertise, but Kim's solution was straightforward. He wanted a movie like Gamera, so why not just hire the people who made Gamera? Partnering with Japan's Toei Studios, the future home of Super Sentai, Ki-Duk Kim brought over several of the special effects team behind Daiei's colossal Colonian to help create the miniatures. Technician Masao Yago, who created Gamera's suit, oversaw the construction of Yongary himself. All of this was just on the border of illegal. The South Korean government had banned all Japanese cultural products following the Japanese occupation of Korea. And yet not only was Kim cloning a fundamentally Japanese movie genre, but also hiring Japanese technicians to work on it. Even when making a kiddie film, the man couldn't help being subversive. And although one could hardly call Yongary a social issues film, it's not without political substance. At least one critic has suggested that, just as Godzilla conjures images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic bomb, Yongary's destruction and the accompanying evacuation recall echoes of the Korean War. Yongary even first appears at precisely the spot where the war ended, symbolically resuming the fight. Critics Steve Ryfle and William Tsutsui also note that Yongary cathartically destroys remnants of Japanese colonialism, like the former Capitol building, yet mercifully and conspicuously spares Korean historical landmarks. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that kaiju movies were often made by highly respected and deliberate directors. Through their monsters, they consciously rendered their nation's particular fears and fantasies on celluloid as apocalyptic visions of destruction. So in spite of Yongary's familiar appearance, he's no mere ripoff. He's a cultural ambassador. Just don't invite him to any UN summits. Yongary would rise again in 1999 in a remake of sorts by longtime fan Hyung-Rae. Updating the monster with a new coat of digital paint, the film was just as much a cash-in on the previous year's American Godzilla. But that's a tale for another time.